Hi, I'm Michelle, writer, illustrator, and editor, and this is another installation of Tea Talk, where we have a little bit of tea and talk about issues that are pertinent to the creative life. Today, have some English breakfast with splash almond milk. So this week I wanted to go a little bit deeper into last week's conversation about procrastination. Specifically, I want to talk about things that people do to procrastinate. And this week I want to talk about this scenario that I see a lot. I know it because years ago this used to be me, and I found ways to work around it. So I have sort of an insider thought perspective about it. Imagine this scenario. You're writing a first chapter to something that you want to produce. While writing that first chapter, you get to the bottom of the chapter, and you go back and reread the chapter you just wrote, and then you go back and rewrite that chapter, and you rewrite that chapter, and then you start stressing the hell out because it's not perfect, and there you can see that there's problems with it. Maybe your skill level isn't where it needs to be for you to actually pull it off. Or maybe you're stuck there, you don't know where you're going to go from there. Maybe it isn't quite what you envisioned. Maybe you have this grand painting in your head of what it has to be, and this is just seems like a rudimentary stick figure in comparison. So overall, what I'm talking about is perfectionism. Voltaire said, "Perfect is the enemy of the good." A lot of people say when they're working on something, well, it's got to become perfect because I'm a perfectionist. And they say it in a way to make it sound like it's a virtue, that they are a perfectionist. They take great care to things because they are a perfectionist. Perfectionism cognitively is not a virtue, it's a vice. Perfectionism is something that people indulge in to comfort themselves about not getting stuff done and about the reactions and receptions they will receive. Perfectionism is something people do in order to control outcomes. And what we talked about last week with procrastination, that one of the biggest factors for people to procrastinate is because they are attached to outcomes. They have anxiety over the possible outcomes. Well, perfectionism is a great tool, at least in the mind of the perfectionist, to control the outcome. If they can somehow engineer all roads to criticism out of their project, then they can be free from criticism. Something happened at some point in these individuals' lives to where if they didn't do something perfectly, flawlessly, without any kinks in its armor where criticism could get through, they would feel ridiculed. They would experience public shame. So the natural response to that is to not put anything out there unless it's perfect. Everything you do has to be done perfectly. This can be absolutely crippling to getting anything done. While you're busy trying to make something perfect, what you're doing is not making things that are good. You're spending a lot of energy not accomplishing anything, in fact, except going back and rewriting and rewriting and rewriting and changing things that most people aren't going to notice or even care about. It's just in your head. When the fact of the matter is the imperfect draft that you have finished in your hand is worth more than this perfect draft that never materializes, never exists because you couldn't get past chapter 1 because you were having an anxiety attack. Cognitively, perfectionism is associated with arrested development. Not to be mean, but clinical psychiatrists and cognitive behavioralists have associated extreme needs perfectionism to people who have not developed a thick outer wall to outward criticism. That's why it's associated to arrested development. It is, frankly, it's a child's response. That's why I say, there's all these people who say, I'm a perfectionist, like it's a virtue, when cognitive behavioralists tell you it's a vice. It's something that you fall back in, that you indulge in to avoid criticism. You manufacture a situation where no one can criticize you. And either you can create this perfect thing that's beyond reproach, or you don't create anything at all. Either way, you're not getting criticized, but you're also not progressing in life. There's a quote that I've come to really enjoy, which I don't know who said it, but I keep hearing it passed around, which is anything worth doing is worth doing badly. Someone who loves to sing will sing even if they sing out of tune. Someone who loves to dance will dance even if they're not the best dancer. Someone who loves to bake will frost a cake that is unlevel. Thus, someone who loves to write will write a book that has flaws because they love the act of the art. Perfectionists do not love the thing they are doing. They love the adulation that they get and the validation they derive from the doing. If you loved writing, you would write even if you sucked at it. And you probably don't suck at it as badly as you think you do. It's just the gremlins in your head telling you suck and that you need to be a perfectionist to stave off criticism. When we are perfectionists, we are other focused. We are not focused on our art. We're not focused on our own careers. We're not focused on what we want to accomplish. We're focused on the theoretical person that is going to read it and ridicule us for it. We have made our art and our life about this theoretical human being that does not exist. So I really ask people to consider, if you find yourself falling into, I gotta get that first chapter perfect for you allow yourself to move on. Why? Who in your life made your life hell if you didn't do things right the first time? Who in your life did that to you? Now that if you don't get things right now as an adult, as a grown person, you cycle back to that weak person, that weak child who was just crushed. Educators, parents, boyfriends, girlfriends, whoever it was that did that to you when you were a younger person, it's why it's called arrested development. You're going back to that stage of life instantly, where I have to do everything perfect to avoid criticism and ridicule. You get punished for trying new things, because everyone, when you try something new, you're not like perfect at it at first. Everyone kind of sucks at something when they first try it. And what happens when you criticize people when they try something new and they're not good at it is you train them to have an aversion to novelty. You train them to have an aversion to new things. It creates a very sad life. It's a sad life where you don't try new things, you don't travel to new places, you don't meet new people. It's really stunted. Thus, what the cognitive behavioralists say, arrested development. I keep bringing that word back for everyone who says perfectionism is some kind of virtue. It's not. It's a bad thing. It's a sign of immaturity. The lie of perfectionism is that you can control outcomes. And through perfecting and controlling every aspect of your project to where it is criticism proof, you've engineered the ability to say anything bad about you out of it. You think you can control other people. This is the more sinister part of it I would really like people to consider. You think you can control other people. There's a larger dynamic to this to even get into, especially with former abuse victims, codependency, whatever. It's this belief that I have to control the reactions and emotions of other people to protect myself. That can turn into something really toxic. And to consider, is your perfectionism toxic? You can't control people. You could make the most perfect Hugo Award-winning book ever, and you'd have 50 people knocking on your door, adding you on Twitter, writing blogs about how you're like somehow a shitty person for whatever. I remember there was a writer on Twitter who was critically acclaimed in every way, and every 5 seconds I see someone on there dragging her for something. It's like for anything. It was, she got her cat from a breeder, so she's a horrible person that deserves to die, and people were threatening to kill her cats. You being perfect at the thing that you're doing will not guarantee you a life without criticism, rebuke, reproach. It will not protect you. It is a lie that you can manufacture and engineer a system where no one says anything bad about you ever. And that's why I sort of gave up on it. Those of you who know me knows my drafting routine is called the sandbox method. It is when you get through your first draft as quickly and as sloppily as possible just to get words on the page. And then you go back and you do edits. I have embraced the ugly draft. It is cancerous to perfectionism. It's about getting all the sand in the sandbox so you can go back and construct castles. It's about not caring that first time around how hideous and ugly your work is. It's not allowing you to indulge in the vice of perfectionism. And as it relates to procrastination, you absolutely people use perfectionism as a way to delay getting to the end, because the end is the outcome. Every time you go backwards to redraft that manuscript, when you haven't gotten to the end yet, is every day that you say no to that end. It's every day you say no to whatever the dream was that was attached to the finishing of that manuscript, instead of just going forward and finishing. That's pretty much all I had to say about that. I think it's a pretty short one. Do you have any your own thoughts on perfectionism? Maybe you think I'm just being a raving asshole. That's fine. Leave it down below, comment, like, and subscribe, and we'll do this again next week.